Hey everyone, my name is Carlos and I'm the founder and CEO of Productled, and I'm here with another CEO. His name is Jeremy Levy and he's the CEO of Indicative. Hey Jeremy.
Hey Carlos, thanks for having me.
Thanks for being on the show. I look forward to chatting more with you about your own thoughts on product, but also building a company that is building a product for product people. So let's start from the beginning. Why don't you tell us a little more about your own personal story and how you got into just building companies?
Sure. So, I've been doing startups for the better part of my career. The first job that I had when I graduated college was at a startup in 2001. And the company that I joined was really just the founder, the CTO, and I joined as an intern. The company was focused on building a wireless ASP. So think of providing the backend services for Wi-Fi. And long story short, I spent about 2.5 years there, and I ended up writing the code that formed the client or the software that our customers used. And it thoroughly hooked me on not just startups, but also on the technology ecosystem. After that, I went on to work at bigger companies. I did a little stint at Pfizer and at Morgan Stanley. And then I met back up with the founder of that company that I started, that I joined after I graduated college, a guy named Andrew Weinrich. And we together started a company called meetMoi. This is about 2004, 2005. And meetMoi was the first location-based mobile dating company. So this effectively was the first mobile app to take location into account from a dating perspective and then match you with people who were in close proximity to you and form like a two-way communication channel. So essentially allow you to have real-time chat in an app. We ended up selling that business to Match.com IAC in around 2013 or so. But while operating that business, a lot of the problems that we had internally, whether it was from data or CRM, ended up becoming the idea for other businesses that we started. So for example, in 2008, we spun out some technology that we developed around mobile CRM, effectively how we are sending push notifications to our users' devices into a company called Xtify. And Xtify became one of the first enterprise CRMs for mobile. We ended up selling that company in about 2012 to IBM. At the time, our customers were Coca-Cola, H&M, Sephora. Now, while operating both of those companies, I was the CTO of those, or at least initially, operating both of those companies, the common theme that we had was how we leverage data in terms of informing our product decisions. And so while at meetMoi, we ended up building effectively our own customer analytics tools, our own product analytics tools. And we decided to take that idea, and that became the basis for Indicative, which today is the company that I'm the CEO of. Indicative is effectively a customer analytics platform that's designed specifically for product teams to allow them to make decisions leveraging data that's collected from the customer's customer journey and inform decisions they're making around their products. We are effectively a BI tool that's designed specifically for product teams.
That's so interesting. And as a founder, I completely resonate with the mindset of you have a problem, first of all. So you try to find a solution for yourself. And then hopefully that becomes a bigger solution for many other people around you. And that's the best way to kind of prove your passion, because when things go south, nobody's ever going to believe more in that problem than yourself.
Well, it's funny you say that because, yes, the companies I've started were effectively solving problems that I had. To be perfectly honest, at the dating company is where I met my wife. So I ended up solving another problem I had, at the time as well.
A success case.
Yes, exactly.
That's really cool. And you said that you also joined as a CTO first, and then now you're working as a CEO. So tell me everyone about that transition.
So, at the first two companies that I founded, I was the CTO. And, I think while I really enjoyed being the CTO because my domain was very clearly defined. In other words, my responsibility started here and it ended over here. And in the transition to becoming a CEO, my areas of responsibility now encompass everything. Whereas basically any problem accounted for otherwise ultimately becomes my problem. And to be honest, it took me time to get comfortable with that transition. I'll tell you what I miss the most about being a CTO is that when I'm solving technology problems, there is there's a lot of satisfaction that comes with that sort of at the end of the day in saying, I solved this problem. Whereas as a CEO, the problems that I'm focused on solving or the goals that I'm focused on achieving are oftentimes objectives that don't come to fruition for whether it's months or years. And so I don't necessarily get the same type of satisfaction on at least a daily basis as I had when I was the CTO.
I come from a technical background as well, so I know exactly what you mean. I think there is something about it, just building. And obviously, as a CEO, you are involved in that process, but you are not directly creating. You are more of an editor.
Yeah, I would say, and not just an editor, also, an inspirer. So, part of my job today, is not just editing that, but it's also articulating, describing what that vision is. And then I would go far as to say facilitator. How can I remove the barriers for the rest of my company to enable us to work more effectively, more productively, and essentially execute towards the vision?
Another thing you mentioned about your current company, Indicative, is that you guys are a business intelligence tool for product managers. At least is one of the user personas. That's interesting because at least when I started my career, most of the tools out there weren't optimized for product managers. There are a lot of tools for salespeople, like a CRM, or others for marketers or for engineers. But product management used to be an afterthought. Even business intelligence by default was more for a data team. So how did you come up with this idea to understand that, okay, there's different user persona here that can get value, and there is the market is still not serving this type of customer?
So I think what makes Indicative unique and special is that we're the only customer analytics platform, the only product analytics platform that allows you to work directly with a data warehouse. So you mentioned, Carlos, sort of traditional BI tools. The problem with traditional BI tools, as you mentioned, is that they're really designed for people who are typically more technical. Secondly, most modern BI tools today ultimately speak SQL, right? So at the end of the day, they are front ends for running SQL queries. And while that's very powerful, and SQL has been a language that's been around for 40 years, SQL in and of itself is not capable of articulating the types of queries that product teams need to be able to write in order to answer product questions. So specifically, a BI tool is really great at saying, well, how many people signed up last month? It's pretty good at saying, how much sales did we have last month? But it's not good at doing things like, how do things like individual behaviors, email opens, logins, registrations, how do all these individual touch points that happen across the customer journey, how do those inform outcomes? Outcomes are typically, in a product sense, things like acquisition, engagement, retention, reducing churn. Understanding the why about that data is why you need a product analytics tool as compared to a BI tool, which focuses more sort of on the aggregates, the pivot table aspect of it. And again, it's not that SQL and a BI tool can't do that. It's just that it needs a data analyst, as you said, or someone more technical to write additional code to be able to produce a chart or result or so on. Whereas product analytics tools are designed specifically to enable people to get to those answers quickly, iteratively, as part of a data decision-making process that they can use on a day-to-day basis when making decisions about product, as opposed to getting an insight, say, in a week or so on.
I mean, I completely agree. I remember when I started, when we started Product School, and a lot of our students would say, hey, how much SQL do I need to know in order to work in product? Do I need to code? And some of those technical skills that, of course, are not going to make you work. Like the more you know, the better. But as a product manager, I believe that you should be able to spend more time working on business side of things, like really identifying what are the real metrics that you care about and how you can visualize and communicate them to the rest of the team. And the more self-sufficient the product team can be, the faster it can iterate. And of course, there are going to be certain parts that you still need to collaborate with a data team. But I like to think of PMs as athletes that can be, they know enough to be dangerous, and hopefully they can run those at the beginning without much support.
You know, our vision is to be able to provide tools so that any product manager can use data to inform those decisions. A lot of times, product decisions can be made based on, or are made based on gut or on instinct. And while those are important, I think, variables when making decisions, we want to be able to provide tools that allow product teams to be able to use data for making every decision. And again, to your point, without having to use SQL, without having to rely on data teams, and be able to empower you to do that quickly. Because if you can do it quickly, that allows you to use it more often and inform more decisions.
Yeah, and I believe eventually you can also involve other members of the team that are not just product. Like any other movement, you are democratizing access to data, where anyone can speak common language and be like, okay, what's going on, without having to create a complicated request to an engineer that is never going to be a priority because there are many other things on the pipeline. And I mean, I believe in all of that. And I think this trend is happening across the board, not just with data, but we see it with prototyping tools. You don't need to be a designer these days in order to really create something and collaborate with designers. You don't need to be a full-on marketer in order to set up a landing page. So all of those, this type of visual or low-code move is really empowering creators.
Yeah, I think that's totally right. And the way I look at that from the data ecosystem perspective is that there's a couple of trends that are coalescing right now. One is the fact that we have access to low-cost cloud data warehouses. So to put that in perspective, 10 years ago, when I was starting meetMoi, if we wanted a data warehouse, we had to effectively, go out and get a contract with IBM. There was no easy way to get a data warehouse. And so, in the context of this call today, we can spin up BigQuery or Redshift and have literally an enterprise quality data warehouse available today. And then secondly, data collection is becoming much more easy. In other words, the ability to not just store that data, but to collect that data through our products is becoming much easier as companies like Segment or mParticle, the CDP market has essentially matured. And what's continuing to happen is that now there are products like Indicative that can sit on top of that trend and provide you with these insights. I think of sort of the ecosystem we're in now in terms of data as being very nascent. We are still relatively at the early stages of how we can leverage data. But if you look at the progress we've made in the last 5 years, where anyone can have a data warehouse now, anyone can start to be able to get interesting, insightful, actionable analytics about their products with just their fingertips, it's gotten incredibly easier. And where we aspire to go with this is to be able to provide not just information on what your customers are doing or provide you the tools to help support a hypothesis you have around building your product, but we're trying to take this even further and leverage the data that you have in your data warehouse to help give you the insights that help you essentially make those product decisions. So again, rather than giving you sort of the ruler to help you measure things, helping tell you, what does that mean? Again, like the why around what your customers are doing from that data.
Switching gears a little bit, I'm interested in learning about your own personal journey. You've built multiple companies. So how do you go about growing your teams and making sure that this vision that you have is clearly communicated across the board and people feel empowered to continue pushing in the same direction?
That's a good question. So I think that it begins with effectively communicating your goals. So, what I have tried to do is effectively communicate across the entire company. What are our objectives? What are we seeking? And the idea being here that if I can help everyone at the company understand what collectively as an organization we are shooting for, then I can trust in each of our respective employees that they're executing towards that vision. In other words, they don't need to be micromanaged. They don't need to be, they understand how what they're working on helps contribute to the outcome, as opposed to, why am I building this, or what is the purpose of this feature, or when you're writing a spec and you're asking an engineering team to build something, them not understanding how this fits into the overall corporate goal. So I think the short answer to your question effectively is communicating that vision effectively across the company helps inspire all of your employees to work against a common goal or the common objective that you have.
And I'm sure that as a product person, you have strong opinions about your own product. So how do you maintain that balance between obviously the CEO trying to push for a specific idea or versus obviously other product leaders in your organization who are tasked with helping you take the lead on that?
So it's hard. I can speak from my own experience, in which case, I look at it as a benevolent dictatorship. At the end of the day, I am a product-based CEO. Like, my special power is not that I'm amazing at sales, not that I'm good at marketing. My special superpower is that I can build product. And so at the end of the day, the company is sort of centered around my vision for how our product should go. And I can tell you, I spend probably half of my time throughout the week focused on simply just, making sure that we're building the product that best serves the needs of our customers. But really, I take the attitude that the buck stops with me. And, for what it's worth, I look at, virtually every spec that we write or requirements that we write. I look at, I look at not every release we do, but any major release we do, I look at that and, I have to essentially say, this is of the quality that we want it to be. And, I take that very seriously, because at the end of the day, our product is what defines every other aspect of our business. And by that, I mean, if we need more customers, the answer effectively is build a better product. If we need to, if we need to raise awareness, the answer is build a better product. And so, for me personally, where I've figured out that I can contribute the most is across all areas of the business is reduced simply to just build a better product.
And I think that's so important to bring out this type of awareness, because there's so many different companies. And when someone is thinking about joining a company, it's important to understand the culture. And I always say that, especially in the early stages, the culture of the company is very similar to the culture of the founders. Hopefully, at its growth, it may change, but I can totally tell that you guys have a product-led mindset, which is really powerful. My company is also product-driven, and I've seen most of the tech companies, especially in Silicon Valley, bringing that mindset, which is not saying, oh, we don't care about the customer. For me, being product-led is also being user-centric.
Yeah, I mean, what we do is, so 100% right. And, we try to reinforce that in multiple ways. So for example, we talk about this notion of like extreme feedback from our customers. So we do QBRs with our customers to make sure that their goals are being met. And we take that opportunity to listen to their feedback to understand what they're doing. So, we try to instill that customer first mentality across all of our interactions with our customers. In our product, we always have a little area that says, send us feedback. We really take that stuff to heart. And, I say this obviously being somewhat biased, but Indicative really is a company that attempts to drive our roadmap, not 100%, but by and large, a lot driven by what our customers need and want and what they're asking for.
So, Jeremy, now I want to understand a bit more about how you are adjusting to whole team working remotely. Is there anything that specifically you had to do to make sure that that type of culture that you created is also being communicated appropriately in the new scenario?
So, our story is interesting. We have two offices, one in New York, one in LA, and obviously with COVID, we closed both of them down relatively early on in March. And I will give I have incredible appreciation for my team in the sense that we have transitioned to working remotely relatively seamlessly. But I do think what is a challenge is how do we maintain sort of the water cooler culture during this period where we can't interact truly face to face. So some of the things that we've done is we have a weekly happy hour where we all get on a Zoom call and, with no agenda, it's not a meeting. And we just talk. And we've done things like playing games as a group together. But, from a more professional perspective, we have all hands meetings every 2 weeks. We were discussing this prior to the call. To the extent it's possible, we're going to try to do an offsite, given the conditions of COVID in the future. But it's a real challenge. And I think, many businesses, not just ours, are struggling to try to figure out how do we maintain a cohesive culture in these times. And, we're treating it sort of like every other problem, which is, we come up with a hypothesis, we come up with an idea, we test it and we see if it works and we try to improve upon it. But, I think we're getting better at it.
And I agree with that type of product mindset. You can apply it to intangible things as well. And that's what I appreciate from CEOs, because it doesn't really matter what the challenge is ahead. There's always going to be a challenge, but it is more about how you want to face it. And we assume that there is no playbook, but there are definitely some lessons learned from the past and something that you can at least guess to help you inform the decision while keeping some flexibility to adjust as you go.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think what you just mentioned, I interpret as sort of comfort with ambiguity, which I think is an important trait for entrepreneurs and CEOs, which is being comfortable in the face of massive ambiguity about every area of your business and not letting that stress you out. I totally agree.
So what else are you curious about learning as you personally grow as a leader?
Well, I think I'll answer it a little bit differently, which are what are the things that I'm most interested in learning these days? And I think, the simple answer to that is it's very easy, especially now, to find myself just working nonstop. Whether it's, after my wife and I make dinner, sitting back on the couch and just getting right back to work. And so the things that I am trying to get more interested in are things that specifically force me to put down my phone, put down the computer, and step away and do something else to help clear my mind. Prior to COVID, one way I did that was I would typically run a marathon every year, and that would force me on a daily basis to get outside, get away from the computer, train. It's healthy for my body and for my mind. This summer it's not really been possible, but I've been fortuitous enough to live relatively close to the ocean. So, I have taken up surfing as a new interest to try to achieve that same thing. In other words, take up activities that allow my mind to decompress a little bit and step away from just working nonstop. And it's healthy and it's fun. So I'm looking for activities that don't require me to be in front of the computer or in front of a phone.
Yes, and now more on a personal note, I also want to learn more about how you are actually thinking about the opportunities for other people who may be listening, thinking, hey, this sounds cool. I would like to start a company. Or maybe it's a product person who's thinking, okay, maybe our company is not super data driven. How can I really go from 0 to 1 without burning out or feeling too overwhelmed?
Yeah, I mean, my longtime co-founder, who I started Indicative with and the prior two companies, he has a saying, which is there's no better time to start a business than now. And I think that's really true, especially even today. In talking about how do we operate as a business remotely, what businesses are succeeding today, given COVID. I think there's tons of opportunities for businesses to get started today. I think the typical way to do that is essentially come up with a rapid prototype. And by rapid prototype, it doesn't mean you have to go build something. It can be having conversations. It can be talking to people. It can be discovering or having conversations that help you figure out what is effectively a viable product. The way to do that, again, isn't necessarily go out and start writing code. You can have conversations about that. You can litmus test that. I'd say the one thing that's important, though, is making sure that you identify what are the objectives during that period. So, for example, if you're trying to figure out if there's an opportunity for, a surfing app, clearly you can see what I have top of mind. It's talking about that and saying, hey, would you buy this app? Sending out a survey, litmus testing that idea. And, the thing is in rapidly incorporating the feedback that you get. It's no different than, any other sort of process, again, which is just like, as quickly as you can incorporate, learn and modify your idea and then get some level of validation allows you to take the step to go to the next phase.
I agree. I think now tools are not an excuse anymore because there are a lot of them and easy to start. Most of them have free plans or freemium options. So it's more about your own personal commitment to really go out there and try something. And I guess that obviously internally you guys drink your own champagne and use Indicative, but what are other tools that are part of your team stack, especially the product team?
Sure. So we use Product Board really to help prioritize tasks internally in terms of requests that we get from customers. And it's an easy way for us to assign them scores and points in terms of just knowing what is the most important from a customer request perspective. Other tools that we use, Jira, obviously, or not obviously, but Jira, productivity tools, Slack. We have a fairly typical, I think, sort of like, SaaS bill at the end of the month compared to everybody else. And again, like we experiment with new tools all the time. I can tell you for me personally, the way I maintain and do my roadmap planning for the company is nothing more sophisticated than just a Google spreadsheet that I share with a few people at the company. It's flexible, it's easy, and it allows me to very easily iterate and make changes to it.
So yes, my last question is about the future. How do you see the future for all people out there trying to build digital experiences?
I think to some extent it's in line with the way it operates today, which is it should ultimately be data driven, right? Like, I mean, to some extent, we provide tools today that allow you to understand how your customers are interacting with your product, with your businesses. And I think as I think about where we want Indicative to go, providing greater insights for that. To your point, how do you build better product experiences moving forward? I think the answer there is take a data-driven approach, and I think the future is going to operate that way as well. As we think about how we want Indicative to work in the future, we think about how can we more easily provide our customers with value that allow them to incorporate data-based decision-making into their product.
It's been great to have you on the show. Thank you for sharing some of your own personal stories. Let's keep building cool and data-driven products.
Thanks, Carlos.
Bye.
Take care.